It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that's about to see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. I'm Christy Powell. With me tonight is my favorite operator, Bianca.
Hello, everybody.
And an oracle who scrapes the darkest parts of the internet to bring us right to the source, Truth Wanted's ObjectivelyDan.
Christy, that is a beautiful, beautiful intro that I could have never come up with. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I'm old enough to be on this show, but
18 and over, I think you'd be all right.
Yeah, I turn 18 in a few years, so it should be good. Yeah.
That's how you get in trouble with YouTube.
Yeah.
Before we get demonetized. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys inviting me on Secular Sexuality. This is my debut.
Really? We haven't had you on the show yet?
No, you got no. V, of course, you've been on my show, Truth Wanted, live on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central here at the Atheist Community of Austin. We talk about what people believe and why. But yeah, no, my first time here. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome. And welcome everybody else on the show today. If you are interested in talking with us about the red pill, which is something I am so excited to finally be talking about, give us a call at 512-991-9242. Or if you want to be on your computer instead, or if you are living outside of the US and don't want to pay for phone charges, visit tiny.cc/callsex to talk with us for free. We're taking your calls and we've got some open lines, so we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I buried the lead. I was so excited to, sneak in all of my Matrix jokes. I forgot to mention what we're here to actually discuss, which is this very creepy, crawly corner of the internet that I guess bleeds into real life. Dan, tell us just broad strokes.
Yeah, well, okay, so the red pill phenomenon, first of all, of course, comes from the Matrix movie, 1999, Wachowski siblings. Hopefully everybody knows the whole thing with that movie, right? It's Neo is talking to Morpheus, the character of that movie, and he's like, here's two pills. The red pill gets you to, kind of see the Matrix, see the world for who it is, and the blue pill is just to go back to your everyday life. So that's where this kind of phrase comes from. But what the red pill is, at least at first, is, how do I put this? A broad philosophy of different ideas about how to have sex with women, or how to get sex with women, really. Broadly written by men for other men to get in women's pants. That's pretty much
a
what
woman involved.
Yeah. Now, so the red pill started in 2012 as a subreddit on Reddit, and right now has 1.7 million subscribers. Of course, it's quarantined right now, which is a thing on Reddit. Basically, it's harder to search for, and it doesn't come up on Google results as easily. But yeah, as V said, mostly for dudes, but there is a red pill women subreddit that I will point out has about 47,000 subscribers. And I'm going to guess that most of those, I don't know if most, but definitely some of those are not women. Yeah, kind of a crazy phenomenon.
Isn't it partially the idea that, the sex aspect certainly ties into it very strongly, and that's usually the reason that people care about this in the first place.
Sure.
But it is this whole concept of right, exactly. It's this concept of feminism actually is bad because men are the ones who can't get away with shit. Women can get away with stuff because they're women, and men can't. Therefore, men are oppressed in some way. And
it's complicated because it's not just one idea. It is an ideology of different kind of beliefs and theories and understandings. It has its history in kind of the pickup artist community. And of course, the pickup artist community has arguably been around since Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? But there was these kind of blogs and writings that happened, especially in the early to mid 2000s, that culminated in what's called the manosphere, as it's been nicknamed. And so one of these people that, a couple of people that wrote about this basically started a thing for that on Reddit, and that's kind of how it started. And we definitely should tap into some of those ideas later. But yeah, in part, it's a criticism of feminism. In part, it's a lot of pseudoscience about men and women, and just not great advice. Not great advice. We'll leave it at that.
Yep. For your edification, viewers, I am going to read you one quote from this Reddit thread, this subreddit. A woman is a lock and a man is a key. If a key opens a lot of locks, it is a master key. But if one lock is opened by many keys, it's a dodgy lock.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Well, who are these people? I mean, just broadly speaking, again, who is coming to these belief systems?
Well, Christy, I'm glad you asked, because maybe we should first start with who started the red pill, right? Do you guys actually know the answer to that?
I do, but we talked about it a little bit before the show. It's Morpheus, yeah?
Well, so Morpheus is the current abbot, but he's actually not one of the guys that first started it. It's a guy named, and his Reddit username is PK Atheist. So, yay, the atheist community is involved in the creation of this. But the Daily Beast did an investigation a few years ago and found that Robert Fisher, who is New Hampshire Lakes Region's State House of Representative, is actually the guy who started the red pill. So somebody in our government.
Are you serious?
That's right. I do remember reading that.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Former Democrat, now Republican Robert Fisher has gotten some flack for his views on women. Of course, when asked directly by the Daily Beast whether he has started this thing, he basically responded like, "What's a pickup artist?" Like, kind of in denial. But if you follow the trail on it, like I said, the article is there to kind of read into that a little bit. It is kind of fascinating. But yeah, he seems to be the one who kind of started this whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yay,
really good.
Local government.
I mean,
really
honestly,
good.
I just like being able to put a finger on it, at least to an extent, because usually these things feel almost inevitable in the way they sort of just bubble up from all corners.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty nebulous. And one thing to keep in mind when talking about this too is there are people who can talk about like the red pill kind of ideas without even knowing what the red pill is. Like, I think it's that common at this point. I kind of hearken it to, you can have a preacher or a pastor, and you can also have somebody who goes to church, or even somebody that doesn't go to church at all, but all their levels of Christianity are going to be different, and how they interpret Christianity is going to be different. That's kind of like the red pill, right? There's people who are hardcore into this stuff. They're making YouTube channels or they're writing books. And there's some people who maybe heard from a friend about some of these ideas, and maybe they follow a blog, but they don't know, how deep this really goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does seem to have very many ties, at least the sexual shaming and the very strict kind of purity culture expectations for women does seem very similar. Like the lock and key analogy is certainly something I've come across before as somebody raised as a woman in a conservative Christian household.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that, because there is an entire subgenre of the red pill community that's dedicated to Christian red pill theory. Whole blogs have been dedicated to this stuff. Mostly.
Is this the way we unite Christians and atheists, you guys?
That's it. That's the way forward, right? But yeah, it's people who take passages from the Bible, take modern red pill theory, and profit, right? Just put it together and see where that goes. So, yep, that's there. That's a thing too.
That's depressing.
Yeah. It is what it is. But I think it would be, I don't know where you want to go as far as questions wise, but maybe it'd be good to talk about like what some of these ideas actually are.
We're kind of poking at the edges of it. But yeah, what are some of the hallmarks or like the necessities of it?
So let me make a clear boundary line distinction right off the bat, okay? Because these kind of communities often get mixed up with other communities. Okay, so the incel community is not the same thing as the red pill community. In fact, the incel community it kind of started it's kind of a chicken and egg situation there, but they were really kind of separate things up until recently. In fact, a lot of people, you'll see these posts on the Red Pill sometimes talk about how they're like former incels and stuff, because they actually have some kind of different ideas as far as their interpretation of women. The incel community kind of puts a lot of blame on women in society, and so why the world is so fucked up. Whereas you see the Red Pill movement kind of taking, again, the pseudoscience, pseudobiology kind of take on women, that it tries to give the appearance of being more neutral. And like, that's just how it is, even though it's really not. So I'll give you an example. This is from a Business Insider article, a quote from the subreddit saying, "You are hating women because you have the wrong," and this is from the Red Pill. "You are hating women because you have the wrong expectations for them. Don't hate someone for something they cannot be. Women are by nature manipulative, attention-seeking, inconsistent, emotional, and hypergamous." Or hypergamous, I don't know how you want to say that. "Accept this truth. Once you do, you can game women for what they are, not what you want them to be."
Oh, gosh.
So, yeah.
There's a lot of these kind of like social Darwinist ideas.
Yeah.
It's dressed up in science in that same kind of fake way.
Yeah, it's this idea that if you understand women well enough, and how they work and how they operate, you can kind of game the system to work in your favor, and get what you want out of them, which is usually sex. A lot of these guys, they're not looking for long-term relationships, although there is a Red Pill LTR, long-term relationship subreddit.
It's a red pill for everyone.
There's a red pill for everyone. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's pretty. It does speak to the broadness of how far this thing has gone. I will say that there's like a dozen different Red Pill sub communities within the Red Pill, which is already kind of a sub community of like the pickup artistry world. It's weird. It's really strange.
Yeah, so I mean, these folks are kind of everybody, and I'm seeing that we're covering like a broad strata of beliefs in some ways. But I also know that they probably have a lot in common. I mean, we're definitely talking about an almost entirely male community. Am I right in guessing a lot of white folks? Or am I right in guessing a lot of privileged guys, probably in their like 20s?
Yeah, so I don't know if the Red Pill community has done any, because sometimes subreddits will do like straw polls on who's actually on their subreddit and stuff, and they kind of get some demographics data. I'm not sure if the Red Pill has actually done that, but if you take a look at like the broader Reddit community as a whole, it's mostly white dudes in their early 20s, late teens, up to their 30s. That seems to be the majority of it. And if we were to extrapolate that to the Red Pill, I'm going to say it's probably mostly that. Certainly almost exclusively male. And, other demographics may apply, but yeah, it's definitely a dude thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I mean, V touched on this, but I just think it's really fascinating, I guess sort of the argument around feminism and around this idea of kind of being overcompensated against. Oftentimes we tell people that fit a certain demographic, you're privileged, you have all of these opportunities. And while that may be true, that doesn't necessarily mean that their lives are going the way that they were told they should or the way that they expected. And that feels to be like a big part of how these ideas take root.
Yeah, well, this is going to sound really crazy, but in context, I promise this makes sense. There are some ideas you can take from the Red Pill that can be beneficial for you. Let me qualify this, okay? I'll give very specific examples. One of the ideas they bring around is you should be confident in yourself and not take the opinion of women as kind of your hallmark. You shouldn't. Women's approval shouldn't be something you strive for. Okay, like that by itself, like, hey, that's fairly good advice, right? Like you want to be able to live for yourself, and self-confidence is attractive no matter what gender you are, I think, or if you don't identify, like whatever, right? Like people like self-confident people. I think that's true. And another thing that the Red Pill folks do is they have like a lot of like weightlifting advice and stuff, and they're into like fitness and things. I don't know any examples off the top of my head of them posting anything super crazy in that regard. As far as I can tell, it's just general like kind of weightlifting stuff, because there is this idea of, and we'll talk about this in a second, of sexual market value. which is that it's like intersectional feminism, except for like trying to prove how like fuckable you are, basically. Like that's the thing, right? It's like, okay, if you have money, if you're rich, like that brings your value up. If you have if you're taller than 6 foot, if you have a certain kind of jawline, like these are all these kinds of things. It's kind of like, and I bring that up because, people talk about like, how do you examine your privilege? This is how people are examining their sexual market value. Because there's a weird tie-in with like libertarian kind of ideas too. Actually, we were joking before the show, and I'll click to this here. I was looking at one of the posts on the Red Pill right now, which is get rich slow with the miracle of compound interest 3-year update. So people are talking about their financial investments and stuff too, right? Definitely these ideas of self-made people. That's kind of a big part of the philosophy.
Yes, self-improvement, like capitalized and weaponized against women in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's where it becomes problematic, right? Because it's more than just get confident and do your best. It's get confident, and also here's how you like emotionally manipulate women to get what you want from them. Like that's where it kind of becomes a problem.
Well, there's no one path for anybody, and I know we've been scratching around at the edges of it, but how does this happen? How do you go from wanting to improve yourself and, stumbling on some gym tips and then find yourself this deep where you're talking about locks and keys and all of it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's, it's really easy to just kind of dunk on these guys and just say,
sure,
look at this, they're being ridiculous. And yeah, the stuff they're saying is ridiculous. But if you come at it with the understanding of, an 18-year-old guy just wrote this, or, hey, this is somebody's first date that they've had where they felt confident and they wanted to share it on this subreddit. Like, that's what you see a lot of these posts are. These are typically younger guys that are posting a lot of this stuff. And like when you're young and you don't know how the world works and you're still trying to figure out your place and how to date and how to do stuff, like a concrete set of instructions on how to do that can really be appealing, especially if it corresponds with your anecdotal experience. Like how many people have been rejected early on as a teenager by someone they liked, like pretty much everybody, right? Like that's a thing. And so if
half the art directed at teenagers is about that.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to mitigate that, and that's like something you want to try to avoid, and you're proving yourself, like this is kind of a guideline for that. And yeah, like I said, if you're taking some of the basic bits of that, like the self-confidence stuff, and you see, that's working, then you're going to look at that other stuff and say, hey, this stuff there's probably got some merit too, because these other ideas are working for me. We see what these people have to say, and they seem knowledgeable. They seem like, there's this genre on the Red Pill of field reports, and it's literally exactly what you think. It's people reporting about either their dates or their sexual encounters, what theories they applied, specific tidbits from their conversations. And I'm not going to say that it's all made up, but I'm sure there's some embellishments in there. I don't know. There is still that culture of, look at this person that I had sex with last night. Totally a 9 out of 10. That kind of thing. And it's
a lot of fantasy fiction. Yeah.
So is there a lot of overlap between like men's rights and like the no fap movement and in incel culture? How do these like branch off from one another, or are they kind of all intermingled?
Yeah, and so I'm looking for my quote that I had for that. So Morpheus, one of the admins, basically had a quote. I was kind of asked about this at one point, saying like, how political is the Red Pill stuff? And he actually said, it's not on its face, not very political at all. And I would say, based on my observations, that's like mostly true if you're looking at like the particular Red Pill subreddits, right? They're not affiliated with any political party. And they may make a joke here and there, but broadly, if you're looking at a lot of these posts, they're not super political. Now, they may talk, unless you understand feminism as a political phenomenon, then yes, that makes them super political. But in terms of like party line stuff, it's not really there. And I think that's true. Now, the Red Pill subreddit is different from like the Red Pill phenomenon, right? So if you go to some of these offshoots and stuff, you're definitely going to see some posts talking about which candidate is a cuck and which candidate is a soy boy, or that kind of stuff. But that's a bit different from the subreddit itself. So Yeah, it's not as political as you might think, but I've also seen some stuff saying that it's like the red pill was also like a gateway for people to join like the alt-right or to do these kinds of crazy things. Elliot Rogers, of course, the young man who did the shooting in California a couple of years ago, was a red pill reader. Dylan Roof was also suspected to be someone who was on there, and a couple of these kinds of, you know, edgy people that have done terrible things, they can kind of tie their roots to some of this stuff, which is concerning.
Right. Well, you can see the kind of overlap in people like, I shudder to say the name aloud, like Stefan Molyneux, right? Like,
yeah,
that's very much like the kind of red pill, women should be like this and all women are alike, and this is how you game the system with them. But then he also does touch very much on politics, and he actually put out a video defending Elliot Rogers. Thing. So yeah, there is that overlap, at least to my experience.
Right. Yeah. It's, again, if you're at a young age and you're trying to figure out how the world works and you're suddenly learning this stuff, and maybe you're finding some of it to be true for you, or it works for you because suddenly you're a little more jacked because you're going to the gym more and you're more confident in yourself. So you're talking to more people. Like, suddenly these people aren't just mentors, they're gurus. They're like, right. Oh, their political opinions must be good too, because they're really into this stuff. So yeah, it's a pipeline. It's a total pipeline. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. There's an interesting, so to tie this into current events real quick, and this is going to be probably a little bit of a tangent, but I did want to make sure we brought it up on the show, which is the whole Jerry Falwell thing. That's happened this last week. One of my good friends, Chrissy Stroop, actually wrote a Twitter thread about why Falwell is not going to be rehabilitated as easily as some other rehabilitated in the way that culturally and socially he becomes acceptable again in a short period of time with his in-group, because of the kind of sexual activity that he was engaged in. And I think that ties in very much with not only Christian culture, but also this kind of toxic red pill, like uber masculine kind of culture, where if your thing is getting cuckolded, right? Like that's cool, but that's not as good as like if you go out and cheat on your wife, that's a manly thing to do, right? Like you can work your way around that, and your manly image is not stained necessarily. Whereas because of the stigma around certain kinds of kinks and certain kind of sex acts, the argument is that Falwell is not actually going to be able to avail himself of the same kind of rehabilitative program that will get him back in the public eye sooner. So I found that fascinating.
Fascinating, but a little devastating, right? Because we're talking about how he's getting the shame he so justly deserves, but for the absolute wrong part of his identity.
Exactly.
I mean, we should be talking about his absolutely ridiculous hypocrisy, and we should be re-examining these beliefs, not nailing him for not living up to these beliefs.
Yeah, not to mention getting a $10 million severance package. I don't know if you guys saw that, but yeah,
that would be the day.
Yeah,
I've had threesomes. Where's my money? No, but exactly, people are kink shaming as their method of punishing him, and that's so not what we should be doing. Not only because that just drives other people who share that kink deeper into that shame and that hiding place, but also there are so many other things to argue about in terms of that.
So many easy ones right there. Like you had to dig deep for this.
The fact that he was with someone who was probably not in a place to actually consent to the activities. If you're a 20-year-old employee, and two multi-billionaires come and say, hey, come have sex with us, what are you going to do? So yeah, all that to say, I found it very interesting that the dialogue of, just give him a year or two and he'll come back, might not apply just because of the fact that his particular sex act contradicts this red pill concept of owning women and owning your masculinity in a very specific way.
Yeah, there was I don't know if you guys saw this, but there were several articles talking about just the there's been interviews with people who've worked with Jerry Falwell, which is fascinating. And I don't think the culture that they had, at least on a board level, was Christian in any sense of the word. So it's interesting that you're talking about, what he'll be shamed for, because I don't know how close. I think he had such a power level over his associates that he would just do stuff that nobody would ever call him out for. So there was lots of stories about how he would show pictures of his wife to like other people, I'm not fully dressed, right? And saying like bragging about having sex with her and stuff, like not something you'd expect from, the guy who's the head of Liberty University, but like, it's just,
I don't know. There's this whole weird culture of like youth pastors like talking about having sex with their wives.
You know what? That's so true, though.
Yeah.
It's a whole.
Well, it's the reward at the end of the tunnel. I mean, you spend all of high school and college basically being told if you are, a Proverbs 1 through 30 man, then you will be rewarded with a Proverbs 31 wife.
Yep. It's the plan.
And then you have to kind of brag. Yeah, you have to. I mean, I definitely sat in churches where pastors went on and on about how beautiful their wife was and how, God is faithful to those who love him and all of these kinds of things.
It reminds me of those pyramid schemes where like black diamonds or like whatever, like the high level people are like
going clear.
Who, like, I have a jet now. Like, this could be you if you just like give me your money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of multi-level marketing and cuckolding for our conversation about Reddit. Let's take a quick moment to jump on the phones.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Let's talk to Jonathan in Alabama.
Hi there.
Hi, Jonathan. How can we help you today?
Hi, Vi. Well, I mean, I'm taking a look at all this and I'm thinking about it. And, I'm getting older. I have younger people in my life. I have a nephew who is a wonderful, kind boy. And I see how the world scares him and how uncertainty scares him. And given what you've been talking about today, that makes me worry that he is a candidate for this sort of indoctrination. And I'm just wondering, like, there's obviously some basic things that we do to prevent bad ideas from taking form. And, that's having good lines of communication and stuff like that, but how do you inoculate against something this specific, again, that does target younger people?
Don't let him join a college frat.
Yeah.
That's my first advice.
Honestly, it's a fair point.
Yeah. Also, not to plug my own stuff, but Dan and I are actually doing collaboration on conspiracy theory. We're doing collaboration, Dan and me, on conspiracy theory language and what to look out for when you might be on that first thread, right? And it might be workout tips or something. Like, how can you tell that somebody is using language that might be indicative of a much larger body of conspiracy underneath it? So that's definitely something that's coming
looking out for that Trojan horse.
Yes.
Exactly. How do you define that?
I do have some real advice, if you don't mind me going first on this, because when I was younger and kind of looking at even some of this stuff, like I think if you have a good relationship with some of the adults in your life that you trust, like you kind of, I remember like throwing out some ideas to the adults in my life and seeing what they thought about these kinds of things, or maybe using language or things that I picked up. And I think, as an adult figure in his life, I think that's something you should be looking out for. What kind of stuff is he interested in? What's he talking about? And having an engaging dialogue where you're not only just questioning him about it, not in like a instigatory kind of way, but more just like hey, what are you interested in? What's going on? So that way, when like real crisis happens in their lives, they're not going to turn to the internet for what they need to do, that they can actually have healthy relationships with the people around them to kind of deal with stuff like, hey, heartbreak. That's harsh when you're 16 and and movies are really bad about telling us how to actually deal with that. Yeah.
He's 9, and the biggest thing he has texted me about is realizing that skating rinks have bad pizza. But, that's actually pretty devastating in my book. But
yeah, for sure.
I definitely took the time to listen to him about that. not because I think it's important that all pizza be. Well, I'm not going to say that. I do think it's important that all.
It is. It's an important value, and we will hold to that.
Yeah. All I'd say.
No, but I love that idea, though. Making sure that you are somebody who this person can come to for advice or to just share opinions and not be judgmental and be that open forum to be like, hey, throw whatever you got at me and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. And just one more thing, and I'll let the host of this show talk, but it's like, you know, when it came to stuff like sex and like girls and things, I did not have. I love my dad, but my relationship with him was not comfortable enough to where I could remotely even talk about a lot of that stuff. And I probably could have learned a thing or two, you know, if I was open to that. But that relationship goes two ways, and you got to be able to be someone who is available to talk about that. Because I don't think my dad would have been comfortable talking about it with me either. So, and, you know, whatever adult role you play in that person's life, like that would be my take. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just add that I think that as important as it is to be available and all of these pieces, I mean, y'all are really hitting on it, making sure that there's space and all of that, that you can, in addition, address these things directly. You know, at 9, you don't necessarily need to go into like the intricacies of Reddit feminism and all of that. But it is okay to be addressing these things by name, especially when they start to become relevant, when they may be coming up. And even if it feels like they're not hearing it, even if it feels like they're not listening, you know, you don't want to force it. And particularly, you don't want to make it dramatic by, you know, having the sit down talk. But generally, you know, if you're just comfortable slinging these things around, it'll land in a way that's a lot more comfortable if you just bring it up casually from time to time by name when you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, he and I have fortunately had this very nice relationship where we have talked about these difficult subjects, where we have talked about sexism and racism and society in general. And, you know, he's 9 years old. He's stressed out as hell.
Oh, I bet.
Really stressed out.
Jeez.
Well, the COVID situation
is
and everything.
stressful.
It is.
You know, it is. It is. There are expectations for you, but you don't always know what those expectations are. And some people will hold you to them hard, and others people won't hold you to them at all. And sometimes it's the same person alternating between that. And that's rough and unfair. And but
my one last thought for you, Jonathan, is I don't know for sure, and I can't make a broad claim about all red pillars, right? But I'm pretty sure that a vast majority of these people have already internalized a lot of the concepts so that when they come across this language, when they come across these ideas, it sounds familiar to them, right? It's going to be a lot easier to convince someone that women are locks and men are keys if that kind of language has been used in the past. Maybe not in a red pill context, but a very good way to kind of inoculate anybody against buying into this is to make the concept as outlandish as possible before even mentioning it, right? If you are pro, you know, women and like you are for gender equality and you're for inclusivity and you're for diversity and all of these things, and he grows up in this kind of environment, it's going to be a much harder leap to get to red pill from there. Not saying it can't happen, but if the language is familiar, if the thought patterns are already there, it's going to be a lot easier to convert somebody.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, we actually had the pronoun talk not too long ago.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That's great.
No, it's important. Well, it's something that's coming up in my life the more that I think about it, as far as that goes, because, you know, socially, I identify as a guy. I'm definitely a guy socially, but, you know, I think about the words he, him, and I have no attachment to them. They mean nothing to me. And masculinity feels kind of like bullshit. The parts of my life that are supposedly masculine are just there. And I don't know if that's a hatred of toxic masculinity or if that's just a rejection of masculine norms or what, but you know,
they're bundled so much.
Figure it out.
It's hard to sort them out. Yeah. And in this culture, it's hard to tell the difference.
I feel you there, Jonathan. I'm a 6'5" large white dude, and always have been. And like, when people talk about these ideas.
5.
Well, I mean, I've always been the biggest kid in my class, and so like this ideas of like masculinity and stuff like that was always a thing, and I didn't really care. I was in Boy Scouts too. I'm an Eagle Scout, and like that was also a thing that was in that culture as well. And it's just like I don't know. Some people, I guess, they feel the need. I don't know if it's a compensation thing, but for a variety of reasons, like whether they socially feel like they don't fit in, and this is like a group identity that they can fall in line with. Yeah, if you're comfortable with yourself, I think it matters. But I'm glad that you're talking about that because, again, I didn't have that conversation when I was 9. I was worried about the next episode of Teen Titans and all kinds of other stuff. So the fact that you're calling about it, that's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much for calling, Jonathan. I love talking to you. I'm happy that you're watching the show.
It's always delightful.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully we'll hear from you again. And
Absolutely.
have a lovely evening.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. All right. Do we want to talk to somebody else? I know we have another red pill question on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump in.
Alex in New Jersey has a question. Hi, Alex. What can we do for you tonight?
Hey, how you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Perfect.
Yeah, what can we do for you tonight?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm just making sure my headphones or whatever are all set up for everything.
Having trouble with that
no.
headphones. Okay.
Oh,
no.
Here we go.
All right, are you good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's my only thing, man. First of all, I'll say, and I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of Atheist Experience, with Matt and then with all the other hosts and everything. So I'm definitely a friend that comes from, constructive criticism from a friend, really. One thing,
Uh-oh.
Yeah, do you feel like we've misunderstood the community somehow? All right, I'm going to drop you back into the queue, let you get that sorted out.
Yeah, we'll drop you back into the queue. Talk with your call screener again and see if maybe you can switch out your headphones for something else. We do want to hear what you have to say. Let's talk with Lilith in Finland. Hello, Lilith.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear us?
How are you guys this fine evening?
Doing good. Thank you for calling in from so far away. How can we help you tonight?
So, let's get to the chase. Cut to the chase. So I have been together with my current partner for 4 years. Actually, our 4-year anniversary is coming very soon.
Oh, congratulations.
And she is part of a very deeply religious and conservative family. In fact, her family is a long lineage of priests and church workers. So they don't know I exist.
Yeah, that's often the case with very religious family.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do about it because they are, the family is very, very controlling. And we can't move in together. We cannot get married. We are engaged, but we cannot get married, not because of laws or anything, just simply because the family will be there. They will be there. And
yeah, what's the relationship with the family like at this point?
Sorry?
What's what's the relationship like with the family at this point? Are they deeply involved in her life?
Close. They are very close. They do not live in Finland. Yes, they don't live in Finland, so they're not physically in touch every day. But they do. They call every day essentially, and she loves her family very much, and the other way around as well. They used to be very controlling. She had a bit of a break with them, but yeah, they don't know I exist. She loves them, and she doesn't want to break their hearts. Literally,
Yeah,
they are
really,
having health problems.
That always complicates things. Have you talked about this with your fiance? Have you talked about what she wants, whether she wants to come out as a couple, or is this something that just you're pushing for, or is she also wanting this?
We have both talked about this ever since our first year together. It is one of the major breaking points in our relationship because we cannot move a single step forward at this point. So we have talked about it very often. We've had not necessarily fights over it, more about, well, intense discussions, but she wants this. And while I am okay with taking as much time as is needed, she's essentially waiting for the right moment to tell them. But I have the feeling that there will not be a right moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm wondering, are you looking at this point for a question of how to do this or whether or not to do this? Because from what I'm hearing from you, this is still very much an up in the air decision, at least on her part. Is that the case at all?
No, we have both decided that it will be known to them at some point, and we are both wanting to do this. We just have no idea how to do it. We have gone all the way from, let's just break it to them just bluntly, just tell them this is what it is if they ever ask. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like there's no point in us just coming forward and, just shouting at their faces, this is the case, deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if they ever asked about any of this, they would know about it immediately with no sugarcoating, but it's not quite as easy as that, is it?
No, it's very hard too when the family doesn't ask in the first place, right? Because that gives you a clue too that maybe they suspect something that they just don't want to know. And so they are actively avoiding that situation. I know from living with very religious family members, if you are a cishet person, the first question grandma asks every time is, so when are you getting married? Who are you seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Who's in your life?
The thing is, the thing with my partner's mother is she does ask, but she asks, so, are you with a man? Have you found a man for yourself yet?
Mm-hmm.
And we do have the suspicion that they also suspect something, but, well.
Yeah, it almost feels like a lot of posturing going on.
Yeah.
There may be some value in introducing some sincerity to that situation. If they're asking, oh, so are you seeing somebody, or if they're asking specifically, are you seeing a man, that might be a moment to jump in and say, no, I'm not, because I'm engaged to a woman, or something along those lines. The fact that she's not giving that answer, I'm certainly not going to penalize her for it, because I see the pain and the difficulty of all of this. But if I'm hearing that y'all have made the decision that it's time for them to know, it feels like that's, if not a window, then certainly almost a responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, sorry if I'm cutting any of you out. There's a little bit of a delay, probably also because of the distance. I do apologize.
No worries at all. No, you're good. We're used to a little bit of a delay on these shows, so we compensate for it just fine. I'm hesitant to give you like concrete advice here, just because it's such a tense and touchy situation that has so many people involved, none of whom I know personally. I know we are just strangers on the internet, as we like to say, but my thinking might be good to put some kind of forward end goal in place. So say maybe by this time next year, I want to be married. You have a year to find that right time, right? Don't push it off into the distant future whenever it happens. If you say, hey, you have a year, then there's going to be motivation to try and create that right time, or find that right time, or maybe, settle for a less than perfect time, because honestly, this is going to be a hard conversation probably, and it is going to entail some hurt feelings, and that's horrible that we have to be in a society where that's the case. But I don't think there's going to be a day where it won't hurt. You know, it's going to hurt at some point. So having that end goal as something to even look forward to, right? Hey, we have to go through this really tough conversation, but now we can move forward with these plans for getting married. Now we can move forward with our relationship fully out in the open. That's got to be something to look forward to as well.
Yeah,
well,
almost like
I like that answer. Sorry, I'm just to say I like that answer because it really emphasizes Lilith's autonomy, as well as your fiance's autonomy. It becomes less about how do I convince her or how do we do this, or it just gives both of y'all a chance to say, I have a job to do or I have a need that needs to be met, and how do I do that? I think if you uncouple your fiance's actions a little bit and let her know, I need for this to be resolved. I need for us to get married, whether it's a year from now or 6 months or whatever feels right for you. And then let her respond to that need. Dan, you jump in. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I like how V framed it because it's an invitation to have that family join you on your life journey. Because that's the emphasis, right? It's like, this is my life. This is how I'm living it. And you're welcome to be a part of that life and a part of that experience. And so like, here's the olive branch. I'm not trans and I can't really speak to that experience, but one thing about coming out is I've only had one coming out time, and that was talking about my atheism. And the long story short of that was my mother found me talking about atheism online, and I had no idea that she knew. And so the disadvantage there was she saw me raw and unfiltered, and I had no control of that narrative. And she saw all that. And that's one of my biggest regrets, because I didn't get to break that to her, and I didn't get to tell her my story the way I would have wanted her to hear it. And so I think that's going to be more impactful if you give them that chance to, explore that and explore how, I don't know, your life has gone up till now. And because the reason why I say that too is because like my mother was really hurt that I didn't tell her for a long time. Right. And that might be something that happens too, right? It's like, oh, why were you keeping this from us? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, because we didn't want to hurt you. Like, that's kind of the whole thing. But it's a tough thing to explain. It's a tough thing to explain. So I definitely feel for you, Lilith. And I hope things go well. I do.
I believe that they will. One could say that I have faith.
Well, glad to hear it. Best of luck.
As for the deadline, we have actually already done that.
Good.
Okay. Yes. A year from when we had gotten engaged. That was 2 years ago.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So the deadline. It's examining like what your boundaries are and what your needs are, and figuring out if this is the right relationship for you. We certainly hope so, because it sounds like there's a beautiful passion there.
Yeah. We almost broke up over this already once because of the deadline going past. And well, we're a bit lost, but I suppose she just, she has to assert her authority over her own life. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I can help her with that any more than I already have, but has to be some self-reflection. Yes, self-reflection, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's probably very helpful to have someone like you who's willing to celebrate that autonomy and help how you can. I'm sure that coming from a very religious family, that wasn't something that was, prioritized with her growing up. And so it's probably is taking a long time. But it sounds like you are a good person for her. So I do hope it works out. Please feel free to call back and let us know how things go if you do have a confrontation with your family. If it is something that that either blows up or goes really well, either way, we'd like to hear back from you.
I shall keep you posted.
All right. Thank you so much, Lilith. Thanks for staying up so late to talk to us.
Thank you all three for your advice, and please have an amazing rest of the show.
Thank you. All right. Wonderful. All right. Do we want to try taking Alex again before we jump back into the interview?
Yeah, if we can get the tech stuff figured out, let's do that quickly.
All right. One last chance, Alex. Here you are. What can we do for you tonight?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Okay, there we go.
Good.
We've got you. What can we help you with? You said you had some friendly advice.
Yeah, because like I'm one of the fans of the show, so like I don't know, because I ran into atheist experience first, I see a stark difference between colors that are there for strife versus clarification. So I want to clarify them in the clarification box. I want to clarify my clarification.
Yeah, no, help us out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and this is something that I think as people, as beings on the planet, we all need to accept. This is going to sound grandiose, but just bear with me, right? It's always the extremist things, the extremist views, or the extremist people that make anybody, whether it's extreme atheists versus atheists like yourselves that just want to have a conversation and get their truth, whether there's black folks that I'm black myself when I say this, okay? There's black folks that protest very peacefully, and whether they're actual protesters or not, there are people that obviously have more destructive means. I only mean this to say, as soon as I heard, because I was listening to y'all, but it's because I listened to Red Pill, and there's some things that are useful in there, as there is in certain things. But as soon as I heard Elliot Rodgers and weaponizing against women, that's why I had to call in, because anything can be used as a BS reason to hate on somebody else, but most of the core freaking all right, just because I'm not the biggest fan of Christianity, but it does say in there to love all people. Everything else in there is a little questionable, but that's in there. Here's my point. Small example. I promise. I was in Philly. Beautiful girlfriend, right? Light-skinned, black woman, all that. Both of us working on point, doing the right thing. And the relationship ended. And one thing that I noticed is she kept wanting to go on, and bear with me, afternoon dates or daytime dates. And she also, was not exactly, feeling me in an intimate fashion, which is weird because, of course, we were seeing each other, right? It turns out one thing I learned afterwards, and this one Red Pill guy was talking about it, oftentimes, unless it's a schedule thing, but oftentimes, when a woman wants to do an afternoon or daytime date, she's looking forward to the interaction, the time with you, towards the food, but a nighttime date usually leads, I'm trying to be polite here, but usually leads to more intimate things. And a lot of women, not all, but those women who choose to use a man for food will happen to take often more daytime dates to get that food without that stuff. I use that as a small example to say this. When I look at things that have happened in my life, whether from young child to trauma, and I'll leave it at that, to later on, at believe it or not, at the hands of women, there are certain things that the Red Pill could have warned me about that I could have known about. And not for nothing, but I've got to say this. Even as men, we have different perspectives. Like the one guy you have on the show today, you know what I mean? 6'5", not in whatever type of way, but like, a decent looking gentleman. There's certain experiences that, no disrespect to him, he's not going to have. I myself, as a 6'2" black guy, are going to have different experiences. It's all going to be different. To some dude, they may not know what it's like to have a girl. We all get turned down, but some guys are not going to know what it's like to be made fun of in front of the whole school.
All right. I want to talk to you real quick, Alex, because I think you're talking about me with the 6'5" guy, because I'm the only 6'5" guy here. Okay, I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but I used to really like the Red Pill. I used to read it like quite a bit. Okay. I was like a daily reader, particularly in college. When I was kind of deconstructing a lot of my beliefs, I thought, hey, and I was trying to figure out why I experienced so much rejection in my life, because contrary to what you might think, and thank you for complimenting me, I appreciate it. I was not as self-confident, and I definitely wanted to improve my looks and stuff. And so, yeah, I totally 100% agree with you, Alex. The Red Pill does have great advice, and for particular context for how you can navigate some of these experiences. But the buck stops when you start talking about women do this and women do that. Like, yes, I've definitely had negative experiences with women. I was telling before the show how I got stood up by my prom date. Like that's the thing that happened to me, and that colored my view of women for a long time. But the plural of anecdote is not evidence. Okay, and so the biggest problem I have with Red Pill theory is that if we'll talk about the 80-20 rule, all this stuff, like, trust me, I know these things, is they're not based on real science and real data. They're based on the anecdotes of people. And I think I could speak for the three hosts of this show by saying that we're not saying that all women are perfect, because certainly we could say as men aren't perfect, but like, what we want to talk about in terms of a broader feminist movement or a broader kind of revolution of how we understand gender and how we interact with each other. We want to take down the negative stuff that happens to men just as much as the negative stuff that happens to women. This isn't a zero-sum game in this kind of project that we're interested in doing. And the red pill kind of stops doing that. It's not helpful to that end because it creates a hierarchy of values between men and women where they can never be equal and never be the same based on some of these principles.
Yeah, Alex, it sounds to me like what you're experiencing is purity culture and the idea that we can't talk about sex, we can't talk about dating, we can't talk about what we actually want. And so we have to use this like weird rituals and codes and like, do we go on a daytime date or a nighttime date? And what does it mean if we go on one kind of date or another kind of date? Because we're not allowed to actually talk about things. So on the one hand, I see where you're coming from, but the problem is, even though that's a problem, the answer is not something that has been proven to incite large amounts of violence against women when taken to its extreme. So for me, I would say, yes, I agree. It's a problem that we don't have these conversations and that this isn't something that everyone can just express fully. If I want to go on a date and I want to have daytime sex, I'm going to say that I want to have daytime sex. If I want to go out and I want food, I'm going to say, hey, I'm kind of broke. Do you want to take me out for a meal? And then later I'll get you one after I get my next paycheck. I'm going to say that, right? That's because I'm a decent person. Doesn't have to do with my gender. But I do think that going to red pill in particular is a dangerous road to go down because it doesn't actually open the dialogue. It just redirects it into a more harmful, often hyperbolic and stereotypical viewpoint. Mm-hmm. So I see where you're coming from. I disagree with your conclusion, if that makes sense.
I do, and I hear you, but that's one of the things I talked about, clearing up misconceptions. I could point to video after video, I'm not lying to you, of men interviewing women, coming to different conclusions. And funny, a lot of these videos, people start off, the men and women on there, two YouTubers go on there, and it starts off maybe a little heated, but by the end, usually they come to a lot of the similar points.
I mean, you can pull out a bunch of videos where you saw a particular interview go a particular way, and I appreciate how compelling that is. That's what we do here in a lot of ways, not cherry picking specific videos, but we have those types of conversations and work to inform and change minds. So I want to listen to what you're saying, but you have to address some of the fundamental issues with this. You started off by comparing it to the Bible and discussing how not everything in the Bible is wrong. You're right. Not everything in the Bible is wrong. But we do this show every week. We do all of the ACA shows to talk about how the ideas in the Bible, when taken and controlling our entire culture, can lead to all kinds of pain and devastation, not just for the people in it, but for the rest of us.
Absolutely, because not to cut you off, but that's why I slightly alluded to, I'll just say it like this. There was two horrible experiences that happened to me when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and it was an older Christian woman that did it, right? And the only reason I bring it up, I'm not trying to be trigger man, I'm not trying to be Mr. Oh, what he said. The only reason I bring it up to say is, a lot of society when it comes to love relationships, and I hate to make it about me, is just a dagger to me. Because feminists, just not all, but certain feminists will say, when stuff happens to men, it doesn't count. Once again, that's the extremists on their side. Which is
horrible and wrong.
Yeah. People are fucked up.
People say that only men do these things to children. When I'm a man, I've protected someone. That's a different story. It's whatever. I've protected a young lady, but they'll say, oh, all men do this. But then when a man says women tend to do this, and all of a sudden they're bad.
Alex, I appreciate your feeling and your experiences, but you're proving our point in a lot of ways when we're talking about anecdotal evidence. Let me encourage you to go back and watch this tape and listen to how many times you say, some people say this and all people do that, or some people act this way or all people act that way. That's just not how science works. And I want to kind of leave it there because I do want to get deeper into this interview. But it sounds like you're going through a journey right now. And I hope we're asking some questions that you might want to investigate a little bit further.
I feel you, but isn't science also based upon looking at general trends? Like the general trend is that most tigers
with a calculator, though, right?
Them.
Like not just as you skim through a web forum, you
It's
actually need to calculate statistics.
No. I'm not talking about skimming through. I'm not talking about just skimming through web forums, because that happens to everybody. Even in politics, you get caught in echo chambers. You find stories. It's recommended stories that are similar to. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about men that I know. I'm not just on trigger stuff, but just.
Right. Again, I'm gonna say goodnight and wrap it up here. But you're talking about men, I'm talking about scientists. That's who does science. I'm not saying that we aren't all our own scientists to an extent, but we hire actual professionals to do actual professional research to understand these things. And what we overwhelmingly understand, no matter what metric we come at it from, is that the differences between men and women are culturally constructed in the vast majority of cases, and the way you're describing women and sexuality is deeply flawed. So I do appreciate you giving us a call, but I just wanted to be clear on these points and give you just one more last word before we say goodnight.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Alex,
and
if you're on Twitter, hit me up at ObjectivelyDan. My DMs are open. If you have something you want to talk about with me, because you mentioned me, and it seems like we've had some similar experiences with life, I'm happy to talk to you, man. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. So that's done there. I want to be clear here. I understand where Alex is coming from. There is not information out there for people, especially for men who have been in some way sexually harmed by women. That is a group of people who are often silenced, who are often dismissed, because it is a thing that happens sometimes, but it's not the majority. And it's I can imagine how painful that must be to only hear one side of the story, even though that is the vast majority of cases. So I get where he's coming from, and I'm glad that Alex is watching this show, because we're trying to be a healthy and inclusive option to something like the Red Pill forums, which are trying to do the same thing in a very toxic and unhelpful and harmful way. So Alex, keep watching the show. Call back again if you would like to have a conversation about something else. Hit up Dan if you'd like to. And yeah, not going to agree with you on your suggestion there, but I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I'm really glad Alex called in as well, because I see so many criticisms of the Red Pill and who these people are that are interested in this. And there's a stereotype that it's like, I don't know, the brawny dude in some comedy movie or something. And like, I think it's more akin to Alex's experiences. It's people who are really hurt and people who are really trying to find answers to their experiences. And that's, I think, paints a better picture of who is drawn to this stuff. And I think if hopefully that encourages empathy amongst people who are like, having trouble figuring out why are people into this? What's convincing? It stems from hurt a lot of times.
Exactly. And it also ties into our conversation with Jonathan, which is that having people to actually talk about this kind of stuff with in a non-judgmental way, who are willing to be resources for you, is going to steer you away from having to go to these harmful groups who are seen to be the only people addressing you personally. So we just need to open the dialogue more, it feels like, and actually counter this by offering good information.
Well, there's a reason we have in our YouTube moderation rules some information about, being very careful in the way we speak about theists and the way we speak about religion, because Dan, I know just a tiny bit of your story, but I believe all three of us were in religion at one point. Yep. And being in a religion doesn't make you an idiot. It doesn't mean that you're gullible or stupid or whatever else. I mean, certainly you may not have been asking the right questions, but how would you know to, if you're in that circumstance? And I know that if not the vast majority, then a huge portion of our audience tonight has a similar story. And I think it's important, as we're talking about all of this, even if you've never been involved in this kind of community, if you found the atheist community of Austin, you certainly know somebody who's been in a community like this.
I love it. All right, let's jump back into the interview then. We've got about half an hour left.
Cool.
Yeah, Dan, you threw a couple of numbers at us and some things like that, but I guess I'm curious, how big is this movement, and which direction does it seem to be going?
You know, like, again, 1.7 million subscribers on the actual subreddit, but that doesn't mean all those people are looking at it every day. Somebody can be subscribed from a couple of years ago and never touched their Reddit account. And, you know, we're also talking about a plethora of blogs, forums, YouTube channels, book authors. I mean, it's impossible to really calculate, I think, exactly who is doing this and who's not. And there's also some intersection between other communities. Again, the incel community, not the same thing. And pick-up artist communities also kind of have different things. You know, there's MGTOW, there's like all men going their own way, you know, in case you're not familiar with that. It's so broad. It'd be hard to calculate. I have no idea, but I imagine it's got to be in the millions if we're talking worldwide, at least.
Yeah. Well, I mean, numbers aside, I know that this has been around as an idea for around about 10 years. Does it feel like it's going in a particular direction? You know, are they gaining more credibility or more clout?
You know, I think what really legitimized it and what got them into the mainstream was like the Gamergate stuff. And like, hopefully nobody is still talking about Gamergate. If they are, then I got some news for you. That was a little while ago and other people have moved on. But like, that's when you first saw the cross section between the red pill, the alt-right, the 4chaners, you know, like everything, it all kind of culminated around that kind of 2014-ish, 2013 era. And that's when I think you saw the zenith of that movement. I don't know how popular it is in terms of, I think the language and some of the ideas are still around, but you know, it's so disseminated at this point that I can't point to particular sources which one's more popular than other ones, but the ideas are there, and they're definitely not going to go away. That's for sure.
I'd say the one that I've been hearing the most about recently is incel culture. That seems to be the most prominent current version of this whole concept, which is a very, again, specific subset of this overarching philosophy that centers around, you know, involuntary celibacy and the fact that you've never had sex and you've never had a girlfriend and all of this. But for me, I think that's the one that's been popping up the most, at least in my searches. But
yeah, I think that's what's more prominent right now, especially that language is going around, like the Chad versus the Virgin memes. Like, that's funny to us now. Those were started as real posts of people complaining about like their lives and stuff like that's and that did come from the incel. Now, I don't know if I explained the particulars of the differences, but really, again, the main difference is the red pill is more about pickup artistry, self-help stuff, whereas inceldom is more of a set science of you need to have a specific jawline, and they talk about Becky's and Stacy's, you know, different kinds of women and how they've been treated throughout their lives, and just the frustration. It's more about the frustration of navigating that experience rather than really trying to do much about it.
Isn't that called taking the black pill? Isn't that the difference there?
Taking the the black pill is more of a nihilistic outlook on life. It's like you can't.
Self-help is done now.
Yes. You're so bad.
Self-help.
Yeah, you're in such a bad place that you can't actually move on from your circumstances. That's kind of the difference. Yeah,
which is a horrible, horrible thing. Like I've been on some of those Reddit threads just to check it out and see, like, okay, what is this? And I walk away depressed. Like, I'm like, this is horrible to live in this mindset and be not only have it be acceptable, but encouraged and part of a subculture where people applaud you for how terribly nihilistic and down on yourself and self-hating you can be. It's horrible.
Oh my gosh.
The thing that punishes you in every other part of your life, you finally have a place to put it that feels empowering. You know, like you are succeeding at it.
You find a community that validates you as well and your experiences. Because here's the worst part about this, in my opinion. I think the way that we've been talking about incels and incel culture for the past couple of years has been totally off base. I can't tell you how many posts or videos I've seen of people shaming incels for being virgins. Like the thing that they've been complaining about. Okay. Like, yeah, they know that. And you shaming them for that. How is that helping? That's only reinforcing the narrative that they're unlovable and they don't fit in. And like, I get it. There's a lot of harassment that happens in these communities, and obviously a lot of violence has happened. But like, how are we helping the situation by just outright shaming them for the things that they openly admit they struggle to? Like on some level, it's almost kind of bullying. It's easier to talk about this stuff online, but we're not seeing these people face to face. But some of the stuff people say is like, you wouldn't say that to that person if they were right in front of you. That's just not, you know.
Well, it's just a punishment mindset rather than a rehabilitative one.
Yeah.
So I know we, kind of poked around the edges of this with Jonathan, but it feels really important to recognize, like, what are some of the hallmarks or dog whistles to know that, your son is talking about ideas that come from this community or even ideas that you yourself might be exploring.
Yeah. So we can talk about some terminology, I think would be a good place to start with that. Obviously, I mentioned the term sexual market value. That's a pretty big idea. This idea of it's a subjective number of, how you look and what your lifestyle is like and how you're socially kind of interacting with people. What's your value in sort of the marketplace? And maybe that's different in different countries. Different people value different things. Like, on some level, there's like a truth to that. Like there's traditions that you can follow up with that some people associate with success, right? That people find, but like, to again, basing your whole identity on this and trying to make this your thing, like you see that happen a lot. So sexual market value, that's one big term. I had some other terms to talk about, but like I want to give an example of the pseudoscience, because I don't think we've tapped into that too much. So the 80-20 rule. Have you guys heard of the 80-20 rule?
Yes, which statistically is just a puzzle box.
the math just doesn't work.
It doesn't work, right? So the idea behind the 80-20 rule is 80% of the women are trying to get with the 20% of men, the top quote unquote 20% of men. I don't know why
all men have 5 girlfriends.
Right. I don't know what that means. I guess it's more like, these people are having sex with all of these sexually viable candidates, as they might put it, or something, and not everybody else is having access to that. It's based on something called the Pareto principle, which was a economic idea started back in 1896 about like 20% of the effort causes 80% of the effects. That's economics. That doesn't actually necessarily apply to people. And there is literally no studies about this in a human context where this applies to anything. And people talk about it, how, this is the rule. This is why people do things, but there's just nothing. There's
you
nothing.
Can't argue with science, Dan.
Yeah.
Also, isn't it kind of like a circular argument in a way? So it's like, if someone has had sex with more than one person, they are by definition in the 20%, which would mean that anybody who had sex is in the 20%.
I guess so.
Had sex is in
It also depends on your lifestyle choice too, right? Like if you're having these kind of open relationships with people, like not everybody's really into that. That may possess, all the things that somebody might be looking for in a partner, but like that has to be an active pursuit, right? So it's kind of, you have problems with how you're defining people doing this stuff, which is why these anecdotes might be convincing. Because if you're reading this stuff, it's like, I had sex with like 5 women last week. It's like, if you spent, time, if you're at college and you don't have a job and you're spending time doing that, like it's probably an environment where that's going to happen more than, I don't know, anywhere else. But
Also, kind of this actually reminds me of a point I was going to make it to one of Alex's point, which is the concept that like if you go out on a date at night, like you want sex, whereas like who has time to go out on a date during the day outside of college? Like it seems like a very like early 20s
bound.
of dating, because like I don't have time to go out on a date at 2 p.m. Like I'm an adult, like I'm kind of life.
Not to mention, after 30, daytime sex is the best sex anyway.
I'll take your word for it, but like, you know, there's other concepts too, because again, this goes to this idea of how we're defining and talking about women is hypergamy. I don't know how to say that word. I don't know if you know if it's a real, but it's hypergamy. It's like polygamy except hyper. You know,
right.
So it's this idea that
yeah,
it's weird, right? So like it's this idea that women are constantly looking for partners that are kind of a higher sexual market value, basically a higher social caste than them. And that's kind of the goal. So if they find somebody that they think they can get with, they'll cheat on you and they will go for it. You know, there's no loyalty there. Like women cannot love for the sake of love. That's something that you'll hear them say. It's purely for a transactional thing, whether it's sex or money or something. And like, I mean, I don't know a guy that's not. I mean, like everybody wants to find somebody that's like that they consider high in you know their classification system, right? Like we're all looking for someone
always
who's
date up, yeah.
But you know, if you've been like. Again, if you're young and you're with other irresponsible people and you've been cheated on by somebody who didn't treat you right, and you read something like that's like, yeah, that makes sense to my experience. Like they were trying to look for somebody else. And that's what happens when young people do stupid shit. And when you find that when you get older and people are looking to have real relationships, you know, that typically changes, but that doesn't change for everybody. And you'll see that too in some of these stories. So yeah. I can keep going with more terms if you want. I have a whole list. I mean,
hit me with your favorites. I think we got time for a few more, but I do want to make sure to leave some space just to talk about the path out. You know, what it looks like to walk away from some of these ideas.
Yeah. So, we should cover a really important one, which I'm surprised we didn't talk about until now. But there's alpha and beta behavior. Okay, so this one is really tricky because.
Or that social Darwinism kind of pseudoscience.
It's a social Darwinism pseudoscience, but also there's stuff in there that, like, again, isn't like 100% wrong, but the framing by which it's portrayed makes it wrong. So, like, again, I talked about being confident and like looking people in the eye when you're talking to them, or you know, these kinds of like basic ideas that you get from, again, reading like Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. Okay, like that's general advice on how to be successful in some of your relationships. Now they'll call these qualities alpha qualities. These are like alpha male qualities that you want to have. A beta male quality is like you know, being a simp, right? Like giving women all of your attention and not making time for yourself, or you know, getting horny on the main. I guess I'm trying to use that phrase more often because I think it's funny, but like, you know, like just making your attraction to somebody very obvious to a point where it's uncomfortable for the other person, right? Like that's like a beta behavior. And there's these tons of lists and ideas of what's alpha and what's beta. And like you put the nail on the head, Christy. It's not based on like a real Darwinist kind of biological science. It's more like, yeah, if you watch humans long enough, there's some things people like better than other things, but like people aren't alphas and betas. There's no defined categories. Maybe you're a mix of both. Maybe there's some characteristic you have that is a turnoff for some people, but other people think is great. You know, like a lot of these things are kind of subjective as well. So it gets really hairy when you talk about this
also,
stuff.
The whole concept of alpha and beta, wasn't that like based on a study of wolves in captivity that then was debunked because
it's been largely disproven as a concept?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's complicated. Because the wolf thing was debunked, but there's like other behaviors, especially in chimp groups and stuff, where you can kind of see some of those like it's not set in stone. Again, it's the idea of like you can have some of these characteristics and maybe be a leader in your group, but that doesn't mean like you are the alpha. You have total control. Like people, especially again in some of these chimp groups and chimpanzee groups specifically is what I'm thinking of. Like people do fight for control over the group, but also if you look at like bonobos, they have systems of like kind of mutual love. They're kind of hippies and stuff. So it's not set in stone for every species of like how these systems work, and it definitely doesn't mean that human society is meant to be that way. Although historically we've been pretty patriarchal and all that. So
Yeah, I think it's just useful to know, like, the thing that I'm taking out of all of this more than anything is we are pattern-seeking machines, right? We like categories. We like grouping things into A or B. We like lists and rules, and this is how people work, and this is how you game the system, and this is all you need to know in order to succeed at things. And it's a compelling concept, and it's nice to imagine that there is a secret code that you tap into, and then all of a sudden, like, everything will work out for you, and you'll get all the sex you want, and you'll get a girlfriend who's super hot, and you'll get a job that you like a lot and pays you a lot of money. Like, that's a great, fantasy to live in, but it's just not the way people work.
Yeah. Well, and it really is the same kind of shortcut that we witness when we look at religion. And it makes sense. Like, we're trying to meet those 4 existential needs. We don't want to be isolated and lonely. We don't want to feel like our actions are meaningless, even though so much of these experiences are dictated by random chance. We like to think that we're in control and that we have some autonomy over our lives that may or may not actually exist. It's kind of the tale as old as time, even as we're dressing it up in, some 1999's idea of what the future should look like, and all of these like modern Reddit, technological novelties. It's the same kind of suffering that the ACA is built to deal with. So I hope that we've done something to scratch away at that tonight. Also, and my last rant for the evening will be, this again proves that religion is not the only place where this kind of subjugation of women and minorities is a thing, right? It's not, if we got rid of religion tomorrow, red pill would still be a thing. It might not be as prevalent, it might not be as socially acceptable, but it is still a thing. We do this as humans, as flawed beings. This is something we have to grapple with, and it's not an easy fix to just say, oh, well, it's religion's fault, so there. Religion facilitates a lot of it. Religion excuses and makes acceptable a lot of things. It rationalizes it. So yes, it's dangerous a lot of the time, but that doesn't mean that it is the sole perpetrator of this kind of harm.
Yeah, Christy, you mentioned you wanted to talk about what's the way out. How do people kind of leave this thing? And so I'd say for myself, when I was, again, looking at this stuff when I was younger, I think the more I grew older, and honestly getting more involved in the atheist community kind of helped me realize that, because I did kind of become more woke to feminism and stuff, and realize what actual feminists were saying, and not what the dude at the camera on YouTube with the 1 million views is saying what feminists are saying. And these ideas of what a real healthy relationship looks like, that caught up to me, and the people around me, it caught up to them. Because again, when people are gross and awful to each other when you're younger and you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to figure stuff out, but like as you mature with age and you find other people who, maybe they don't work out for you at the end, but at least like you have a better quality of relationship. And as I've gotten older, I'd say all of my relationships have gotten better every single time, because I've learned from experience, and I can draw from this pool of what works and what doesn't, rather than having other people on the internet say, this is how you should handle things. This is what you should be doing. I guess just life gets to you. I want to point to a great subreddit as well. There's like an ex-red pill subreddit community that people can check out, but there's one really great subreddit called r/menslib that I really like. And they talk about, kind of red pill stuff and dissect it, but really it's more of a community for men who are trying to tackle with what that means. What does it mean to be a man? How are you integrating into society? Are you practicing consent with people? Are you figuring out, how comfortable you are with the systems that we've set up? And are the systems we've set up even worth keeping around? Are they do they need to be changed? It's such a positive place. And I think if I found that community before I found the red pill community, I wouldn't have to have gone through all the things that I did.
Sure.
So yeah, I giving a shout out to that subreddit. It's really cool. And I'm sure there's other resources as well. There's tons of blog posts from people who were really into the red pill community and stuff who have since kind of disavowed that. So, that's a Google click away. So check that out.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to include both of those in the show notes to this episode and the links that go with that. But I guess I just want to maybe not harp on this too much, but recognize that the same skills that we are, that AXP, really distills down, the same conversations that are happening on Talk Heathen. I mean, the things that are happening on the ACA network are about how to look at these things, how to think critically, how to examine the fallacies and recognize some of these things. And, for Alex and anybody else watching, I'm hoping that, those skills alone are helping you to ask the right questions.
Yeah. I hear Truth Wanted's pretty good too, but I don't know that. it's
I mean, that seemed too obvious with you here,
Speaking of, Dan, you want to plug your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Objectively Dan. I shit post on Twitter all the time. So follow me at ObjectivelyDan on there. But also my main gig right now is with Truth Wanted, which is a call-in show just like this one, where we talk about what people believe and why. Tomorrow we're having guest Scott Crow on, who was once wanted by the U.S. government for his anarchist activities. So that's the kind of conversations we have.
Yeah.
This kind of whatever calls that Matt gets on AXP that he's not patient enough to deal with, they go to Truth Wanted. That's what we do. Aliens.
About aliens and
but we talk about religion too. That comes up quite a bit. But we get new guests every single week, so be sure to check it out live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. And that's all I'm up to these days right now.
That's
well,
awesome.
and I want to encourage people to check out the Truth Wanted fan group, which, much like the Secular Sexuality fan group, is a great place for people to meet and talk about these shows. The Truth Wanted fan group is great, but not quite as great as the Secular Sexuality fan group, just because there aren't as many people.
We just talked about anecdote and science, Christy, and I think, the jury's still out on that one. I'll leave it at that.
Right. Okay, I'm sure that's why so many more people. Never mind. You can pick your favorite fan group, and I would thank you to check those out and to be able to interact with us and tell us what you want to do on the show and all of those pieces. But also, it's a great opportunity to kind of thank the people who help put this together. And by that, I mean our incredible crew who jumps on their cam every week. Thank you all so much for helping all of the moving pieces, keeping this going.
Woo!
Thanks, crew.
All right. If you would like to get in touch with us on a day that is not Thursday, and if you are somewhere where you have to stay up super late like Lilith, or if you want to talk more about a topic but maybe are nervous about calling in, feel free to email us at sex@atheist-community.org. Or you can call our hotline, which is super useful. That's 512-666-0-ASK. That's 512-666-0275. And we have mailbag episodes every couple of months where we take all of the emails, all of the voicemails, and we just answer all of your questions on air. So if you're interested in getting in touch with us that way, we would love to hear from you.
All right. And well, beyond that, Dan, thank you again for being here. If you are catching this live on Thursday night, we're going to be jumping into the ACA Discord here in just a moment. We hope to see you there, to see you in Facebook and these different online communities. Other than that, I think this is a really good time to examine your beliefs, to think about your worldview. And, if you like what you see, go ahead and give yourself a big old orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.
But the show has ended. Goodbye.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No.